Good morning and welcome to another edition of 15 Minutes of Flame. This is Robert Phoenix. How was everybody this morning? Had a little bit of a glitch as I started today's program. Don't know why. But it was the first time I ever got a episode not published, or we had difficulty publishing your episode. Yeah, a little Mercury retrograde, but you know what? We go with the flow. We roll with the punches. What's happening out there? It's the 27th of March, 3 days after the march in March, and I have new David Hogg information to share with you today. We're going to get into it a little bit. And again, try to really understand and disseminate what the hell is going on out there in the world. And if you're not paying attention, you're going to miss it. Luckily, most of you are paying attention. In fact, I'd say all of you are paying attention, because you wouldn't be listening to this show if you weren't. And I'm not putting my show at a level that is the sole determinant of what truth and reality is in our consensual reality matrix. No, not in the least. But at the very least, I'm willing to turn over a few stones and every now and then slay a sacred cow or two. So if you're listening, you're probably in the same process that I'm going through and experiencing in my own life. And that's really just what it's about, right? That's what it's about. So I've been doing some deep research and just really trying to understand where we are contextually in terms of what's been happening since 1999. Actually, no. A little bit after that. What's been happening since 2009? 10 years after that. 1999 was actually a pretty good time. I have to admit, it was a great year in my life, 1999. That was when I interviewed David Bowie, and the .com, the Silicon Rush was on, and it was a lot of fun to be in the Bay Area from 1997 through 2000. That was a fun time. That was a period when it seemed like anything was possible. Like if you had a decent idea for a website and an e-commerce model, somebody was willing to throw millions of dollars at you. And at that time, I was a journalist, and I was going to all these openings for these launches for these websites, most of which had barely half an idea to hang their hat on, but it was enough to get funded. And it was incredible. At that time, technology was advancing. We went from the 18-bit, 16-bit, went from 16-bit computing to, I think we got up to about 64 pretty quickly within the span of about 3 or 4 years. So I was always into music, and that computing power meant a lot in terms of what you could do with sampling and loops. And so it was an amazing time for electronic music, which I was a huge fan of at that time. Anyway, just taking a little trip down memory lane. In 2009, we had the crash. We had the big crash. We had the bubble and the crash. And so I was talking about this on Sunday night. I talked about it with Virginia on Friday, and I've been writing about it over the past 24 hours, how we've moved from the second house to the third house to the fourth house to the fifth house in terms of destabilization, social destabilization. And when we step back and look at the patterns and we look at what's taken place, there has been an incredibly well thought out, incredibly well planned out, incredibly well orchestrated series of attacks. And when I say attacks, they're not just attacks on America or the American people, or to some extent even the world, although Europe is pretty much lost. Europe is toast for the most part. They're attacks on our consciousness. That's what they are. They are attacks on our consciousness. And when we step back and really look at them and segment them out, all of a sudden, wow, it's pretty clear something's going on here. So I want to get back into it. I want to get back into this pattern. I'm going to share with you the latest on David Hogg and the brown shirts a little bit later in the show. But if we go back and look at that 2008, 2009 period, we have the real estate bubble burst like a big boil. They had to lance the boil because they'd been trading on toxic debt for decades, and now it was coming due. Of course, it was nicely orchestrated by Ben Bernanke and Timothy Geithner, and having no idea where the hell that money went. None whatsoever. And then I talked about this, of course, a bit yesterday, and then after that, what do we have? We have Trayvon Martin, the death of Trayvon Martin, and that's a trigger event for what takes place. That happened in February of 2012. February 2012, right after the big 2012 moments. Actually, that was before. Sorry, that was kicking 2012 off. So we have Trayvon Martin, and then we have a series of events that take place during that time. We have Mike Brown and Ferguson and Freddie Gray and Baltimore, and we have I always forget his name, Eric Garner, New York City. But it's really the two main events really are, well, the three main events are Trayvon Martin and Mike Brown, Ferguson, and Freddie Gray in Baltimore. And the reason why those are the main events, of course there are others, but the Mike Brown event and the Freddie Gray event, it's funny we got Brown and Gray, they were the catalyst for major social conflagrations, riots, just total chaos inside Ferguson and inside Baltimore on the heels of those events. So that's why they're kind of important to kind of, to wrap our heads around. So we went through this. We saw the rise of Black Lives Matter, and this was all part of a well thought out, well planned out attack on not just the American people, but our consciousness. We have the divide and conquer, the black and the white. This is what took place. Okay. And again, I've talked about this before, but I'll say it again. Prior to all this stuff happening with Trayvon Martin and Mike Brown and Freddie Gray, Eric Garner, the what I would call the politicization of these deaths, and they were completely and utterly politicized. I was having a great relationship with a community of black astrologers on Facebook. It was great. I was doing a lot of their shows. They were coming onto my shows. There was a really cool fusion, a nice synthesis of, different communities, different cultures, different ways of interpreting the chart and exchange of knowledge. This is where it's at. This is the highest level of communication and bonding, where we exchange Te or Chi back and forth, and we exchange ideas, and we exchange a spark, and we exchange these things that cause us to catalyze and grow. And this is the most dynamic and highest form of relating. And a lot of that was taking place. And then after these events occurred, I could just watch my friends in this world turn on a dime and go into 180 mode. And I sat there and I said, I said to them, look, we're being played. We are being played. This is a divide and conquer strategy. I was all over it early on. But they weren't hearing any of it because they had a list of complaints, grievances, deep-seated wounds, in some cases very real, very real. Prejudice does exist. It does exist, and people have experienced prejudice. I'm not saying it doesn't exist. But we're trying to get beyond prejudice. At least that's what I thought we were trying to do. But instead, what happened was that it became an issue, and it became an open wound, and the scab just kept getting picked over and picked over and picked over and picked over, and this was the design. This was the strategy. This is what was happening. Not at any point did Obama come out and say, we feel like a country divided, but that's really an illusion, or this is our work. We need to come together. We need to transcend our differences. We need to work together to find better solutions. He didn't do that because because they were running these events. And that was not part of the planned response. Part of the planned response was, go ahead. You have a right to protest. Let it burn. Let it burn. That was the strategy. And that was only the first strategy. I mean, there were other things that went on during that time. What else did we have? Well, we had the Boston Marathon. We had Newtown, Sandy Hook. Now, the reason why Sandy Hook didn't take is because you can't have a bunch of 5 or 6 year olds leading marches in Washington, D.C. I don't want to get into the weeds on Sandy Hook, but clearly something incredibly fishy was taking place, and I'm not sure anybody died. Although I do have a very interesting sort of internet friend / co-researcher who says that people did die in Sandy Hook, and this guy does incredibly solid work. And he says he knows they died because he did something illegal to find out. I don't know what it is. He didn't share it with me. But if he did share it with me, then maybe I would have, maybe I would side more on, or tilt more to his side on this. But clearly there's just, the in-our-face moments of the Sandy Hook Choir and the kids down in New Orleans singing for the Super Bowl, and looking at those kids and looking at the kids that supposedly died. Yeah, I don't think so. Then we have Robbie Parker and that whole insanity, right? Total insanity. So I'm just bringing this up because it's a stop along the way. Then we had the Boston Marathon, and that was going through all these different events that took place because I'm writing a piece on it. And it's kind of mind-blowing what went down. If they had spent as much energy creating these events, marketing them, and doing their best to politicize them, to create a wedge and a divide and conquer strategy into actual governing and creating programs and doing things for the people, boy, what an amazing presidency that would have been. It was very creative, though. Very creative in terms of deconstruction and using Saul Alinsky's tactics, putting the rules for radicals into play. It's all there. It's all there. And I'm not. Look, I'm a witness. That's what I am. I'm a witness to this. Now, Man, there was some high strange. This is Mercury retrograde. There was some high strange going on back then. I'm gonna bring up a couple of stories from that time that have just been relegated to the dustbin of history. Some of you might remember a few of these. Of course, we have Dylan Roof, who was, I think, Nicholas Cruz 1.0, or he's the kid that was in South Carolina. You had the lame ass picture of him with a Confederate flag. And apparently he was just fine with everybody else. He had friends that were black, white, brown, didn't matter. All of a sudden, Dylan Roof becomes somebody who turns, and he gets some radical ideas about white supremacy and goes to shoot up a church in South Carolina. Well, back when that happened, I did the math on that. I did the math in terms of where the church is, where the police station is, how long it took for him to go in, fire, clean. I mean, it doesn't fit. The numbers and the math do not fit. There's no way he could have done it in that amount of time, because he would have had to have been an expert shot. And if I don't even want to go into the weeds on this thing, but there's no way he did it. I'm not sure anybody died. And if they did die, clearly it was at the hands of some kind of a hit team. But the reaction after the whole thing was just mind-blowing. Oh, it's love, love, love. We just love. Oh yeah, we're just, pray for forgiveness. We forgive him. It's like 24 hours after. I mean, they're like reading off a script. The whole thing is mind-boggling. I was watching these people. Love, she was just all about love. She just loved. So we're going to just carry that on and love too. And we forgive him. I was like, you got to be kidding me. You pull the string. It was just bizarre. You just see the glazed look over their faces. Oh yeah, we just love. She was all about love. Where did we hear that? Where did we hear that script? Well, okay. Let's go back down memory lane. Shall we? We talked about Freddie Gray, Michael Brown, Eric Garner. Who remembers Bryce Williams? Anybody remember Bryce Williams? Sound familiar? Bryce Williams. Bryce Williams was, again, supposedly the guy that shot Allison Parker and Adam Ward in Roanoke, Virginia. You remember that? Remember that event? And how completely and utterly cheesy her supposed boyfriend was after that event, walking around with the photo album. Our love was white hot. White hot. I mean, it was laughable. It was comical. And he's standing out there with the station manager he just took that photo album all over the place. He was like Linus in his blanket. That photo album was Linus's little blanket. I imagine this guy was sucking his thumb off the camera. I mean, it's just insane. And again, it's that glazed over, kind of monotone, I'm in a trance vibe. We just loved each other so much. Here we are, sharing an ice cream together. Oh my, I miss her so much. I miss her so much, I can barely summon any emotion. Yes, I was her boyfriend. See, here's the photo album. I was her. I mean, and then he flubs up in the station manager who's standing next to him, starts looking at him like, you better get back on script, you little shit. I think he actually mentions a he instead of a she. Like, it's clear that this guy's probably not that interested in Allison Parker or any other being that might even remotely resemble Allison Parker. Bryce Williams was black. He was black. And this is during this time, right? This time where we have black shootings, white shootings, black shootings, white shootings. And then we have Andy Parker. Oh, we gotta march for gun control. We gotta get these guns out of here. You know, Andy Parker, Allison's dad, the actor. Bryce Williams. What about Chris Harper Mercer? That name ring a bell? Does that name ring a bell? Chris Harper Mercer was supposedly a shooter at Umpqua Community College in Roseburg, Oregon. Chris Mintz was one of the guys who got shot up there. Chris Mintz apparently was a vet who was doing some kind of occupational training at Roseburg, and he got shot up. You know, Chris Mintz got over $700,000 on his GoFundMe account. How about that? $700,000 on a GoFundMe account after that shooting. And I remember looking at pictures of Chris Mintz in the hospital. It didn't really look like the man was all that wounded. I just have to say. Chris Harper Mercer. He's black. What was funny about that is that he was clearly, and again, I'm not doing this to say, oh, here's another black guy killing white people. No, I'm just trying to show you that we had this program that was black and white and black and white and black and white and black and white, divide and conquer, divide and conquer, divide and conquer, create a wedge, separate, separate, right? That's what was happening. It was happening because you bet your ass that people recognized that Bryce Williams, the supposed shooter who shot himself while he was racing away from police. Oh, I'm so messed up. Oh, I'm going to put the gun to my head and I'm going to shoot myself while I'm driving. Or, oh my God, I got this gun and I don't know what to do and it's just going to go off and I'm going to kill. I mean, come on, right? But he was black and people probably noticed he was black. It went into their heads, especially in a place like Roanoke, Virginia. It went into their heads. Just as if when Michael Brown or Freddie Gray, right, or Eric Garner, they're probably recognizing, although in, I believe the case of Freddie Gray, one of the officers that arrested him was not white, okay? But in that community, they're going to say cops are white, cops are bad, and thus we have a problem with white people. So this is going on. This is going on the whole time. The whole time. Do you think that people who were following this thing at Umpqua Community College made a note that this Chris Harper Mercer guy was? Of course they did. Of course they did. You think people noted that Dylan Roof was white? Of course they did. The funny thing about the Chris Harper Mercer character, and who knows with these people, I don't know. He clearly is black. And then as the days wore on after the events, they started to lighten his skin tone in the photos. It was bizarre. It was absolutely and totally bizarre. I got another name for you. Chris Dorner. Chris Dorner. Does anybody remember Chris Dorner? Probably not. But I'll tell you, for about a week, Chris Dorner was front and center on the cable news networks. Chris Dorner was the former LAPD guy who wound up going rogue and got into a firefight in Big Bear. Do you remember that? Former naval reservist. This guy was a crack shooter. He'd been deployed in the Middle East. He had deep ties to the military-industrial complex, wound up becoming a cop in LA, and that whole thing goes sideways very quickly, very strange. He gets fired by the LAPD, and about 3 years later, he decides he's going to take revenge on them. Asymmetrical. He's going to go asymmetrical against the LAPD, which means he goes out and starts to kill people. So again, if you're watching the news, what are you noticing? Chris Dorner happens to be black. So we have the black, white, the black. I mean, I'm just bringing this stuff up because it's Mercury retrograde, and it's important to understand that we have been involved in a major mindfuck operation since 2009. And it's all been carefully staged and crafted. Look, I could go back. I could go to 9/11. I don't want to do that right now. I want to start. I really want to start in the second house and the economic bubble, which is clearly illustrative. And people being bottomed out, gutted out, feeling unsafe, insecure, and just billions, maybe close to trillions of dollars just being sucked up through negative amortization with huge losses. Huge losses. And there were people that were profiting off of those losses for a very long time. And then the check came due. And guess what? They couldn't cash the damn check because there was nothing there. Nothing. Zero, zilch, nada. The country went into crisis, went into default because a lot of those lenders, a lot of those people were backed, right? They were backed by Freddie Mac, Fannie Mae, AIG. So then what happens? They make more money. Bernanke and Olson just pile it on. And then they say they don't know where it went. The audacity. The audacity. Ben Bernanke, I don't know. I don't know where it went. We sent it over to Europe. Shrugged his shoulders. What are you going to do? What are you going to do to me? You ain't going to do shit to me. Let's be clear about that. But this whole period that really starts in February of 2012, February 26, 2012, when Trayvon Martin gets killed, that's the fuse that lights it all. And then we go through this whole cycle. Of course, the Dylann Roof piece is very important because the Dylann Roof piece leads to the removal of the Confederate flag and then the statuary, which also begins to take place. And this is kind of this, this final phase. And we have Charlottesville. It's all part of it. It's all part of this plan. So there's the removal of the statuary, which is basically the removal of history. And as I continue to go through this, you're going to see that more and more history is being removed, dissolved, and disintegrated before our very eyes, which is, by the way, a pretty common tactic when there's a regime change, that they want to eradicate history on whatever level possible. So clearly the Confederate stuff began to take place, and then it started to get really out of hand, out of control. It's like, well, we want to take down George Washington. That'll never happen. The Masons will never let that shit happen. George Washington was a great Mason, so they'll never let that occur. But it's all part of it, right? It's all part of this movement, the eradication. And this is all staged. And this is all planned, all thought out. They have a roadmap that they've been working with. Now, on the right, you'd think that the right would have some kind of pushback. Hell no, they don't care. They don't care. They're sitting around. They're doing lines off the same 6-year-old butt that they've managed to order online and laugh about it at the same time, right? I mean, clearly, there is no demarcation really between the left and the right. And they're all working towards the same agenda. At that level, they are. They only pretend and appear to be at each other's throats. They're not. They're not. Again, the classic example of this was George Bush versus John Kerry, two Skull and Bones members. Skull and Bones is the template. It is the template of the globalist stratagem, which is to produce and use people on both sides of the left and the right and deploy them when necessary to create a field of duality, divide and conquer, so we could have capitalism versus communism, capitalism versus socialism, and then ultimately manifest this into a significant final conflagration where the duality is ultimately reconciled by the same forces who have created it. And they'll step in at a certain point in time and say, this is the way it's going to be. This is how it's going to look. We're going to get rid of, this version of whatever good and evil and right and wrong and black and white is. And you better shut the fuck up, because this is going to be the new paradigm. This is the new world you're living in. And you'll be thankful that we've done this, because you're ungovernable and unmanageable. You're just children. We're stepping in and we're going to run this. This is what George Bush was talking about when he had the New World Order speech. The rule of the law. Not the law of the jungle, but the rule of the law. Rule of the law. You just want to put your hands around his throat. He was making this speech. I did. Anyway. So we get into Me Too, which is on the heels of all this black and white duality. Let's set people against one another. And then, by the way, that all culminates in the football season, right, of 2016 and 2017. 2016 and 2017. It started in 2016 when Colin Kaepernick started kneeling. And then, of course, everybody else just continued to kneel. And it grew and grew and grew and grew and grew. And the next thing you know, we've got teams kneeling and together. And oh my God. Man, I don't give a shit. I mean, they can kneel. But what are they really kneeling for? What are they kneeling for? That was the thing that always blew my mind. It's like, what are they kneeling for? Police brutality? The only reason why they were kneeling for police brutality is because it was marketed. It was marketed. It was marketed and it was politicized. That shit happens every day. Yeah, of course, maybe there's a reason why you could kneel for it every day. But why does it happen? Is it because one group is a victim and the other group is a perp? Well, which one is the victim and which one is the perp? I would say that they probably change partners. But they're probably both equally victim and perp. Although maybe on the cop side, a bit less. Very few people are innocent in this world, just to let you know. But that's why they were kneeling. They were kneeling because it was being marketed. And I'm sure inside of certain circles, inside the NFL, with certain players, they were told what to do. They were told what to do and how to manage the situation. And then some of it just goes viral. We have to also look at the viral effect around this stuff. And for a lot of it, that was Saturn and Sagittarius, which is opposite Gemini, which of course is duality. So let's move forward. Let's move the ball forward. Everything culminates in Charlottesville. And that clusterfuck. By the way, whatever happened to the promoters of the Charlottesville event? Whatever happened to these leaders on the alt-right? They're gone. Why? Because they were probably cutouts as well. Just setting up another group of disaffected people, trying to get their voice heard, feeling as though society and the world is basically passing them by. Here comes somebody who theoretically stands up for, their rights, their thoughts, their ideas, their beliefs, their feelings, and guess what? They're just herded into a pen. That's exactly what Charlottesville was. And a lot of these people are decent people. They're tired of being pushed around. They're tired of being pushed around. They're tired of seeing an unlevel playing field in certain areas of their life. They're tired of it. And they say, look, I have a voice. I don't want to be left behind. I want to, I want to be heard. I want to be seen. Just like everybody else wants to be heard and seen, apparently. Then you have these gatekeepers. Let them. They just herded them right into that pen. So it was a perfect allegory for the whole process. And that was the culmination. That was the culmination of the black and white, Black Lives Matter, divide and conquer version of the third house. And then the fourth house, we get into Me Too. I'm just bringing this stuff up because it's really important to understand, to see this in terms of its continuity. Yes, it is astrological. And yes, it is also a planned stratagem. And the Me Too stuff was ready to go. October 2017, that's when Harvey Weinstein had 2 articles published simultaneously by the New Yorker and the New York Times. So there were people that were deployed to do a story on Harvey Weinstein. They had some sources, so they went to the sources. Rose McGowan was one, and clearly there were plenty more. And this is where the start of the Me Too movement takes off. I was on Facebook last week, and somebody pointed out that Garrison Keillor's Prairie Home Companion show, which I couldn't stand, to be honest with you. Like, what the hell are these people talking about? I guess if I kind of stepped it down a bit and hung with it, there's this folksy kind of, rural, semi-rural insider that you would only know if you lived in Minnesota, in a certain part of Minnesota. Everybody thought it was quaint. And Garrison Keillor was like the modern Will Rogers. He stepped into that mantle. So every Sunday they'd have Prairie Home Companion on PBS. And I wasn't a huge Garrison Keillor fan either. But guess what? He got Me Too'd. Apparently you can't find the Prairie Home Companion stuff anywhere now. PBS has just said, yep, gone. Because this man did something not very nice. He was not a nice man. He violated the trust of some women out there. And by God, we're going to eradicate that because we don't want to have any association. No, we produced this and aired this show for a long time, right? A couple decades easily. You can't find one. You cannot find one version of, maybe you can. I don't know. I haven't looked that intensely, but I know that somebody online did. And here's again, what are we talking about? We're talking about the eradication of history. The eradication of history. Just see you later. Let's remove it. Let's take it out of circulation. Now, just because I don't like Prairie Home Companion, not the biggest Garrison Keillor fan, I don't think it should be removed. It's a part of American history. Whether I like it or not, it represents something that happened during a particular time and was popular with a particular group of people and made a creative and cultural and artistic statement that's representative to some degree of that time. And whether it's punk rock or Prairie Home Companion, it's part of our history and it's being taken away. It's being taken away. At some point in time, punk rock will be taken away. They'll look at all the bands from Southern California and they'll say, you know what, these bands were, they're Orange County bands. And any band from Orange County is a neo-Nazi band, so you won't be able to get their music anymore. Sorry, this video no longer exists. This song no longer. This is where we're headed. I'm telling you, this is where we're headed. History is becoming erased. And it's becoming erased through these various events, whether it's Prairie Home Companion or the Statues of the South. I'll be surprised if anything that Matt Lauer has done. Well, what about Charlie Rose? This is what happened during Me Too. We're still kind of in Me Too, but that phase is dwindling. It's dying off. It's fading. Now we're in a different phase. It's like hashtag Black Lives Matter, hashtag Me Too, hashtag never again. Boom, 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 right? But the weird thing was with Me Too, and I can talk about it in retrospect, Charlie Rose was everywhere. He was on 60 Minutes. He was on morning shows. He was doing his own specials. And then he's just gone. Like, see you later, gone. Matt Lauer, same deal. Now, Matt Lauer, I'm not here to defend Matt Lauer at all. But again, just disappeared, gone. No goodbye. Middle of the night, knock on the door, you're gone, buddy. You're fired. Louis C.K. gone. You won't see Louis C.K. again for at least another 10 years, maybe ever. That he's a Virgo and he's riddled with guilt. I know that for a fact. Poor Virgos. And what about Louis C.K.'s material? Is it going to be available? I don't know. I haven't done a hardcore check. So eradication history. And we're seeing this. We've been in a cultural revolution, in my estimation, since 2009. And it's all been carefully planned, carefully staged, and they're going after and segmenting. They're segmenting us. It's segmenting every single portion of our society, right? In the second house, it was the Occupy movement. The 1% versus the 99%. Us versus them. The elites versus the non-elites. The home holders versus the bankers. In the third house, it was black versus white. In the fourth house, it's men versus women. Me Too. That's where it is. That's where Me Too takes place, the fourth house. And now here we are in the fifth house, which brings me to David Hogg. And what is the fifth house? It's children. It is young versus old. This is the 60s all over again, with the exception, well, I guess we could throw in the haves and the have-nots. Because of the 60s in 1964? 1964, 65, we have the war on poverty, Lyndon Johnson's Great Society, and that is the haves versus the have-nots. And it's the creation. It wasn't the creation, there was already a bit of a welfare state in place, thanks to Roosevelt, but it was the welfare state on steroids, thanks to Johnson. So we have a little bit of that. This is kind of a redux of the 60s. So you ask yourself, well, why is this happening like the 1960s? The reanimation of the social and racial animus between black and white. The reanimation of women who are angry, pissed off, vocal, And now, more than ever, supported by mass media. Why is it now that we're dealing with fiery youth who resemble to some extent the stars, the radical stars that shot across the skies in the 1960s? The Jerry Rubins, the Abbie Hoffmans, the Bill Ayers, the Mark Rudds, the Bernadine Dorns, the Tom Haydens. Why is it now that we have these young faces emerging as fiery leaders, the firebrands of the new dissidents? Why does it resemble the 60s so much? Well, maybe it's because the architects of these movements actually were part of the 60s. Maybe it's because people like Hillary Clinton, Bill Ayers, Bernadine Dorn, to some extent Barack Obama, he was a youth during the 60s, but clearly indoctrinated into the same social programming, same social mechanism that Bill Ayers, Hillary Clinton, and Bernadine Dorn were part of. That's the Alinsky School. And Obama went through it. So he's part of it. The reason why these events echo the 60s is because the architects of these events lived through the 60s. And they were a part of the 60s. And they have been orchestrating through their connections in the media what's been taking place over the last 9 years. Now, we are at a stage of reckoning because this is the 2018 is the 20 year, the year 20, right? That is the aeon. That is the aeon in the major arcana, the end of one world and the beginning of another. That is where we are right now. Okay? And if this started in earnest in 2009, which it did, in 2018, we are at a 9-year cycle. This is the 9th year of this program. This is the 9th year of this stratagem, the 9th year of this putsch. What happens in year 10? Question mark. There's a new 9-year cycle because we don't go to 10. We go back to what? We go back to 1. We don't go to 0. We go to 1. Initiation. Catalyzation. So there's a lot riding on this year. There's a lot riding on 2018. People have 2020 in their long distance viewfinder. And 2020 is significant. It's a 22 year. It's the master builder. Supposedly that's when all the plans are going to be put into place. From 5G to global governance. Apparently that is the year. Okay? But the Saturn-Pluto conjunction. A lot can happen in 2 years. And there's a lot that can happen this year as well. Let me just bring us back to David Hogg and the little brown shirts. And I'm not talking about the kids who are being swept along. These kids that are in junior high and high school, they're being swept along by the tide. I mean, when I think about it, I get really angry. I get angry. Because these kids, many of them are going through the Saturn opposition right around 14, 15 years old. And when that happens, people separate. They separate out. Young people separate out from their families, their popular culture. And what do? They try to find their own voice. That's part of the Saturn opposition. They recreate themselves. And these people that are behind the kids in Parkland, Michael Bloomberg, Warren Buffett, George Clooney, Oprah Winfrey, Barack Obama. They may think that they are doing the right and the virtuous thing, although what I know about many of these people are far from right and even further from virtuous. And in my estimation, what they're what they're orchestrating is something that is akin to being completely predatory. And they're preying upon the innocence, the energy, and the openness of a generation. They're preying upon it. And they are in the process of politicizing it. And in my estimation, it may not be a federal crime or civil crime, but it is a crime against the spirit. Because these kids they deserve some level of being allowed to discover the world on their own terms without being managed, psychologically managed, massaged, and herded into a potential demographic and a voter block. It makes me sick to my stomach. And does the right do it? I guess so. I guess the right has their own version of it, although I'm trying to find it. I don't think kids are that organized on the right. You know what kids do here in Fredericksburg, which is a very conservative city, and I would say definitely on the red side and not on the blue side? You know what their level of organization is? It's called 4-H. That's what they do out here. That's about as organized as it gets. They learn how to raise an animal, they learn how to bake a pie, they learn how to shoot a bow and arrow. There's your level of organization on the 4-H tip, or on the right side. David Hogg has been quoted on a recent documentary that CBS is going to air on the Parkland 6. He's been quoted as saying that he had heard there was a shooting at the school. So he got on his bike and he rode his bike for 3 miles. For 3 miles to go to the school. That's right. And start to shoot his video. And if you say, I'm scratching my head. I mean, this is on video. You know, 4 of them are sitting there being interviewed for this big CBS documentary. And you're going to hear about this because David Hogg claims that he was at school during the time of the shooting. Now, one of the producers from CBS has come out and said, well, David made a mistake. And what he was talking about was after the shooting happened, he went home and came back later to interview people. Well, that's not what he says in the interview. Okay? So, what's the story? Was he there during the shooting? Or did he somehow manically and magically pedal his bike and appear? Because if you do the math on it, the shooting starts around 2:30, 2:35, right around there. And if he hears about the shooting, that's going to be probably around maybe 2:40, which means that it would take him 15 minutes to pedal to get from his house, which is 3 miles away from the school, to get there. And what happens when he gets there? So we're basically at 2:45, 2:50. I mean, shit is going down. Whatever is going down, it's going down. So David Hogg can like somehow navigate through Scott Israel's line of defense. He can navigate through that, navigate through a hail of bullets, chaos, mayhem, get to a classroom, which is locked on the inside. It's like, hey, let me in. It's David. I'm here to do some interviews. Oh, yeah, sure, come on in. Just make sure not to let any bullets come in through the door. Okay, come on. So did that really happen? Did he actually do that? No, of course he didn't do that. Now, the question is, was he at the school? Here's what I think. think David Hogg did those interviews. I think he did those interviews. Not, I could be wrong, but he did those interviews prior to the shooting. That's my sense. Because they had drills there, and he was there, and it was during a drill. That's my sense. I could be completely wrong about this, but I think he probably manufactured those actually before the shooting. Because he couldn't be in two places at once. So his story is starting to unravel. And I would encourage you to go find that video. In fact, I posted it on Facebook. By the way, there was some classic David Hogg brown shirt and Nazi memes that are starting to be. I mean, these are really good. It's like taking memery to a whole new level. Incredible stuff. Because the correlative is there. It feels like a total brown shirt movement. And again, it's being triggered, right? It is being triggered by these social this thing had been cooked up and baked for a while. That's why there was so much money and organization available from the moment the media showed up at Parkland, okay? And if people would listen to this, they may see it, they may understand it, or they may say, "Oh, you're just a conspiracy nut." No, the pattern is quite clear. The problem is that there's no opposition. We are the opposition, and we're not the opposition because we're on the right. No, we're the opposition because we are in pursuit of the truth and clarity, and we don't want to be bullshitted. We don't want to be bullied. We don't want to be harassed by these forces who are so quick to condemn us when we are actually really just doing our best to peel back these layers and discover that reality has been hijacked. And it's been hijacked for quite a long time. But I'm looking at 2009 to 2018. It's a great time, Mercury retrograde, to go back over the last 10 years and just take a look at this. Because it's not just this event. Why is this event in some ways so powerful? Well, it's powerful because it's kids. That's number one. And number two, it is the accumulation of energy and momentum that started in 2009 when the country went bankrupt. And that was a major moment of demoralization for many of us, for a lot of you out there. That's when the real demoralization obviously was 9/11, 2001. That's really where it starts. But I'm not going to get into it. I'm just looking at the last 9 years. It'll be interesting to see how they spin David saying, well, I was at home, and as soon as I heard about the shooting, I got on my bike and I pedaled to school, versus all of his in-depth interviews that he was doing. You know, there's a picture of David Hogg and Dan Rather together, which I thought was really interesting because I've been thinking about Dan Rather as it relates to David Hogg. Dan Rather was a local newsman in Texas, and he actually wound up covering a hurricane, and I believe it was either in Port Arthur or Corpus. It was somewhere on the coast, and the reason why it was one of the reasons why Rather rose to a larger audience and public purview was because he was there when people were being evacuated. So he risked his life and limb in order to bring the news to the people, right? To have a bird's eye view of this devastating hurricane He was a profile of bravery and courage, no doubt. So David Hogg has been framing himself in the same light. Like, I risked body and limb in order to create this media. And he even goes on to say, well, I helped people because I knew about guns. I fired guns. I'm a pacifist, but I fired guns. My father's ex-FBI. So not only was I here capturing this and putting my life on the line to do it, because I'll put my life on the line if it's going to take guns being removed from the system, I'll do it. But not only that, I had knowledge about guns, and I was able to magically pass them on to everybody that was around me so that they knew what they were dealing with. And with that level of information, they were able to proceed more calmly and carefully in navigating through the chaos and the confusion. Yes, I was the person that did that because of my knowledge about guns. Yes, I fired an AR-15. I've been around guns. My father was ex-FBI, but I'm a pacifist. Look, this thing's got, the reason why I'm talking about it is because it needs to be shut down. It needs to be shut down. Not because people don't have a right to express themselves. Of course they do. But it needs to be shut down. And the people in Washington and the people outside of the higher level alternative media, which of course has been demonized ad infinitum thanks to Alex Jones, these are the minuscule voices, and they are relegated now to wacko, nut job, crackpot conspiracy theorists. I don't give a shit. This has got to be stopped in its tracks. It's dangerous. It's absolutely dangerous, and I'm going to talk about it for as long as I need to. And you got to spread the information. Susan from Hawaii sent me let me see if I can find this here. I'm going to read this to you. This is what we are up against. And I'm not saying we're up against the people. No, this is a mindset that we're up against. Let me pull this up here. It's 9/11, by the way. I've been doing this for an hour today. Guess I had a lot to say. Hold on a second. I want to read this to you. I'm still here. Come on, Facebook. Let me in. Let me in. Yes, I know you're scanning all my data, scraping and doing everything you can before you actually let me in so I can read my messages. Okay, here we go. So you can't hear my show. This is what's happening. This is BS. It says I'm recording. Let me go into messages here. Yeah. I am transmitting sound. People can hear me, right? Yes. This thing is being recorded. Let me read this to you. Mercury retrograde. I was sent this this meme. I'm going to read it to you. I'll give you the visual. What an amazing sign. Hashtag March for Our Lives. It is a picture of Jesus depicted in the Orthodox style of iconography holding an AR-15. For I was hungry and you cut my food stamps. I was a stranger and you deported me. I was sick and you denied me health care. I was a child afraid to go to school. And you voted with the NRA. Matthew, the New Hypocritical Version. That's gotten 52,000 shares. 52,000 shares. We are in a war. We are in a war for our consciousness. We are in a war to express free thoughts. We are in a war to be sovereign individuals, sovereign people, to freely determine who we are and what we would like to be. And it's not just now. We've been here for a very long time, and we're all just really starting to wake up. And this has huge implications. Huge implications. We're shedding our skins. Okay, that's about it. I don't know if this show will have survived because Judy apparently heard it. And then some other people have not been able to hear it. So I don't know what's happening, but it shows here that I'm recording. At the beginning of the show, I had a unable to publish episode. Anyway, I'm going to get on out of here and stay fired up, stay passionate, keep the flame lit, stay close to the truth on this thing, because we're at a tipping point. We're at a tipping point, and these kids are going to be in school for another 2 months, so they have a lot of work ahead of them to be able to mobilize their energy, tap into their energy, siphon off their energy. This is what they're going to be doing, and 2 months is a short time frame. We go into summer break, and there's a whole new stratagem and a whole new program, which I've talked about before. That's a 6-house stratagem and program, which is about the workplace and health. You have to look at things like Planned Parenthood and the workplace in general. Anyway, use your head to discern what's real, your heart to stay open what's possible. I'm Robert Phoenix. I'll see you back here tomorrow, 24 hours from today.